Let's talk about Assassin's Creed. So recently there was some news. It was originally a report that came out from Bloomberg, post by Jason Schreier, and talking about a new Assassin's Creed project. This is currently codenamed Assassin's Creed Infinity, which makes perfect sense with what we're going to be talking about here. And not long after, Ubisoft did put out their own statement, and Jason Schreier did also backtrack on his personal Twitter where he said, "Hey, just for everyone to know, I've been talking about Ubisoft for this for weeks. They did not just scramble to post up an article because Bloomberg put one up, just for the record, for anyone that might have been curious about that." But basically, well, here's what we got. Assassin's Creed Infinity is like the next big project for Assassin's Creed. As we've seen with the last 3 games, they've really gone to this big open world, RPG type of feel with Origins, Odyssey, and Valhalla, straying away from the kind of the setup that we've had for years in the past. Well, Infinity is going to apparently be a live service game, which did not set well with a lot of people. It's going to, with that said, it's going to contain multiple historical settings. It's also a cross-studio collab with Ubisoft Montreal and Ubisoft Quebec. The rumored launch is apparently 2024. That is very much up in the air because Ubisoft, of course, has been dealing with a shit ton of allegations.
Yep.
And they're working out all the insiders and trying to figure out who's going to stay, who's going to get fired, all that shit. So that's a big take it with a huge grain of salt. So basically what this essentially is going to be is, the way that I was kind of described and the way that I kind of understood is like, think of like a central hub where you can go in and hop into more or less, I guess, like different air quotes games of Assassin's Creed. I'm not saying the games that we've come to know in the past, like you're not going to necessarily be able to like go play Assassin's Creed 2 or this. It's not like a collection. It's like just multiple, like just think of expansions that you're going to be able to kind of hop in between, where you could get 1 to 2 large content expansions a year, kind of like an MMO, but it's not necessarily a multiplayer game, at least from what I've understood. You said you saw some reports about it potentially being multiplayer, which I wouldn't necessarily be against on that because low-key, the Assassin's Creed multiplayer back in the day was actually pretty fun. I played it on Brotherhood and Revelations, and it was actually a pretty good time. But I haven't understood it to be a multiplayer MMO experience. I've understood it to just be like, which it being like a central hub of different things. Kind of honestly, like, let's be real, Assassin's Creed fans, it kind of makes sense with the whole, Animus thing, Like, imagine like you being like a Desmond getting into an Animus and going through different stuff. Well, that's one way I kind of thought about it. But anyway, what's some thoughts you have?
I mean, it does make sense to say, because when you look back at all the Assassin's Creed games, it sort of had that thing after Desmond and everything. It was always pretty much, there was some weird thing of, because what was it? Black Flag, actually, is a whole thing where, Black Flag, you're a random employee that's just injected into it because they've used the information from Desmond to make the Animus an entertainment system for people to watch these different historical dramas and whatnot and live them through the Animus entertainment and whatnot. And everything else. So, I mean, it does make sense making a central hub thing. My only issue with this is, like, in which it's mostly just because we don't have enough information. Like, it's going to be a central hub is more or less going to be like an archive where they put all their new games, and like, are they going to be full-length size games like they've been doing? Or is it going to be more like what we got a couple years back, like the Assassin's Creed India, Russia, and China.
Yeah, I remember those.
Which were the 2D scrollers. They were much smaller Assassin's Creed games, and they were also 2D platformers. And, I mean, from my understanding, they were all right, but they weren't the Assassin's Creed experience that people know and enjoy, especially now since they've gone to these gigantic time killer of RPG-style Assassin's Creeds, which people can put 100, 200 hours easily if they really want to try and find everything.
Yeah, it's very true. Like, I know, like we've talked about before, Valhalla going up to like potentially like 200 something hours. Like, it has like an insane amount of time that you can put into it. One way that I kind of thought about this as well is just because when it comes to this game and its expansions, it is very well set up in all different areas. Is I kind of think of it like an Elder Scrolls Online, because every expansion they go to like a different region or a different whatever. I kind of relate to that, where like every single few months, like maybe it's like twice a year or once a year, you get the new content update for Assassin's Creed Infinity, and you're going to Japan, and the next one you're going to Russia or UK or whatever, right? That's kind of how I relate it. But it being live service, I can understand people being upset about that. Live service, it has its fandom, and then there's in a game like Assassin's Creed, it's been the way that it has been for 13, 15 years.
Easily.
I think Assassin's Creed 1 was 2007 maybe. I could be wrong on that. I mean, Assassin's Creed having its single player, formula for so long, and now it potentially going to live service, I can get why people are upset. I mean, I understand it. I'm not, 100%. But at the same time, like for just content reasons, I don't think it's going to be a bad thing because, like Zach mentioned, like we've talked about before, one of the biggest problems with the past few Assassin's Creed is just the sheer amount of content, where it's just like a majority of content in like Valhalla, most gamers are never going to get to. They're never going to see. They're never going to experience, just because there's so much to play. Because I will say this, and I am definitely a victim of this. 1,000% I'm a victim of this, as a lot of people are. The one problem that Assassin's Creed and Ubisoft has had for many years is they've had like, I don't know what game really started it. For me, it was post 3. After 3, it was very tough for me to pick back up an Assassin's Creed game where it's just Ubisoft fatigue. You know what I mean? Where, it's like...
Nope.
Yeah, okay, well...
I'm sorry, I suffered through Assassin's Creed 1.
I mean, so did I. So did I. So I feel you. But, just Ubisoft fatigue is a common thing that a lot of people suffer from, where, Valhalla or Origins or Odyssey, people will dump like 30, 40 hours into it, and they might still only be like on the first part or just second part, and there's still multiple to go, and they're just like, God, I'm going to put this down. I'll pick it back up. I'll pick it back up a while, in a couple weeks or something, and then it's like 1 year later, still hasn't touched it.
Pretty much.
So that's why I don't think a live service will be a terrible thing for Assassin's Creed, because I feel like the games have gotten stale. Yeah, I have not really played enough of the newer ones to maybe make my opinion super validated there. But just from someone who has tried to touch pretty much almost every Assassin's Creed that's come out since really 3, that was the last one I played. I've tried to touch them. Mm-hmm. Man, I can't get into them. Like I don't know. I'm suffering from the fatigue for sure.
I mean, I don't think they're necessarily stale. I think it's more just, as you said, and we've said before, is there is so much into these games where you easily get sidetracked and forget the whole main storyline. And people are age range and whatnot that does tons of stuff and everything. You can play a game for solid 2 or 3 weeks easily, but then after 3 weeks, you're like, I need to do something else.
Yeah.
But, I mean, for other people, they can just keep going until the end. But I think that's the biggest thing with these is just the amount of open worldness that there is, and which has all turned out great. They play fun and everything. It's just, I guess, if Infinity is going to be a live service and maybe smaller batches of games, I just wonder how it's going to feel and play. Because if it is going to be sort of smaller, consistent updates here and there, what's sort of going to be the drive to want to keep back? Because there's been also other franchises that have sort of done that over the last year or two that haven't done well, like Wolfenstein. Mm-hmm. They did Youngbloods, which was a live service game. It was just sort of brushed under the rug. There's one other one I can't think of right off the top of my head now, which I knew that was sort of okay, but then wasn't the greatest.
Right.
So, I mean, I guess until we get more information, I'm not entirely sure how I feel about it yet, because the Assassin's Creed, as you said, has been a large franchise, and you're right. The first one was actually in 2007.
Bingo.
And it's just a weird feeling of thinking that it's not going to be these single player, hey, everything's here.
Right.
Almost makes me think of, since it's Assassin's Creed, almost Hitman, which Hitman did well as live service, even though people weren't happy with it initially. It actually turned out fine. So I guess depending on if it's similar like how Hitman ended up doing live service, it might be pretty good, but we'll find out.
Yeah, and one last little tidbit on this before we move on is this whole thing does remind me of a previous conversation we had, and this conversation was actually sparked up because of Valhalla, which is, what do you prefer? Do you prefer like a short 10 to 20, 10 to 30 hour experience game, or the 50, 60, 70, 80 plus? And, it kind of reminds me of that conversation, because one possible thing that you can get out of these live service game with these expansions is, imagine an expansion like going to Japan or something is a 10-hour experience, 10 to 15-hour experience. And then it's just a 10 to 15-hour experience every single time, a year apart, 6 months apart. That might bring some more life to Assassin's Creed potentially. So, I don't know. We'll see. It is something that I am a little excited for to see more information on, because, again, I've been very much out of the franchise for so long. I follow along with it. I have a lot of love for the franchise. But maybe this is something that could really pull me back in. I don't know. I do understand why people are upset, though. I do get it.